2 years ago, a young grizzly bear was rescued from the brink of death by a solitary park ranger deep in the Alaskan wild. They formed a bond that defied logic, but no one expected what would happen when their paths crossed again after 730 days apart: a bear, a man, and a moment that stunned everyone who witnessed it. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our powerful wildlife stories that reveal just how deep the ties between man and nature can go. The smoke hung heavy over the Alaskan horizon, painting the sky with streaks of gray and orange. Wildfires had torn through the edges of Denali National Park for 3 straight days, and the air was thick with the smell of charred pine and scorched earth. Ranger Elias McKinley hadn't slept in nearly 40 hours, but the moment he heard a faint rustle near a blackened tree stump, instinct took over. There, nestled in a circle of ash and debris, was something small and shaking: a bear cub. Its fur was matted with soot, eyes wide and panicked, and its left front paw trembled, obviously injured. Elias's heart pounded. He crouched down slowly, speaking in a low, steady voice. "Hey there, little guy, you're okay now? I got you." The cub didn't growl, didn't bolt, just stared. Elias had seen grizzlies before, big, majestic, and unpredictable, but something about this one was different. Maybe it was how small it looked in the devastation, or maybe it was how, even in pain, the cub didn't show fear, just need. He radioed the wildlife rescue unit, got a cub alone, maybe 5 months old, burned paw, no mother in sight. The reply crackled back, "Copy that, bring him in if you can. Rehab stations prepped." It wasn't protocol for a ranger to transport a wild bear alone, but Elias didn't wait. He wrapped the cub in his fireproof jacket and carried him the 3 miles back to the temporary camp, all the while whispering things he didn't fully understand himself. "You're a tough one, huh? Look at you, holding on." That night, as helicopters flew overhead and crews fought back walls of flame, Elias sat on the edge of the medical tent. The cub, now nicknamed Takakota, Lakota 4, friend to everyone, lay with his paw bandaged, dozing from the sedative. Elias watched him for hours. The next morning, the lead biologist, Dr. Mara Santos, approached. "He's lucky you found him," she said. Elias didn't take his eyes off the cub. "I didn't find him. He found me." For the next 4 months, Elias visited the rehab center every weekend. At first, Takakota kept his distance, cautious, but over time he would wander over, nudge Elias's hand, and even roll onto his back near him, a sign of rare trust. They weren't supposed to bond, rehabilitation centers were strict about that, but the bond formed anyway. One snowy morning, Takakota limped to the edge of the enclosure, laid his head near the fence where Elias stood, and made a soft huffing sound. Elias responded with his usual low whistle. That became their thing, a silent call and answer, a code between man and bear. But as spring rolled in, so did the decision. "He's strong enough to return to the wild," Dr. Santos said. "It's time." Elias nodded. "That's what's best." But the night before Takakota's release, Elias stayed late, sat near the fence again, and whistled one last time. "You'll forget me," he whispered. "That's okay, you're not supposed to remember." Takakota didn't make a sound, just looked back with those knowing amber eyes. But what if he did remember? And what if that memory surfaced when Elias needed it most? 2 years passed. Elias McKinley stayed at the same ranger post, stationed at the northern edge of Denali National Park. The fires had long since gone out, but their scars still marked the land and him. He never talked much about Takakota. No one really asked. Bears came and went, they were wild creatures, not companions. That was the rule. That was the job. But some nights, when the wind stirred through the pines just right, Elias swore he could hear that familiar huff or imagined the flicker of amber eyes watching from a ridge. He never admitted it out loud, not even to Dr. Santos when she stopped by during her seasonal wildlife rounds. "Still alone up here?" she asked, leaning on the porch railing of his tiny ranger cabin. "Company's overrated," he joked, offering her a tin cup of strong black coffee. She smiled, but something lingered in her expression. "You ever wonder what happened to him?" Elias didn't answer right away. He looked toward the forest, thick with white spruce and birch, dusted with early snow. Every day, meanwhile, life in the park marched on. There were poachers to track, tourists to guide, and animals to monitor. That fall, the grizzlies were particularly active. The berries had been plentiful, and sightings increased near the eastern ridge, a territory where Elias had rescued Takakota all those months ago. But one report stood out: a solo male grizzly, huge scar across the left paw, didn't behave like most others. He avoided confrontation with humans but had been seen circling ranger stations, almost watching. Could be a released bear that's wandered too close to civilization, Mara speculated during their next meeting. If he gets any bolder, we'll have to relocate him, or worse. Elias tensed. "Let me check it out first." "You think it's him?" "I don't know what I think, but I owe it to him to make sure." So, he set out, 3 days solo into the high valley, snow crunching beneath his boots, rifle slung across his back, only for safety, never to use. He hiked through bitter winds across iced-over creeks and finally to a clearing near the edge of the tree line where the latest sighting had been reported. That night, Elias made camp under the stars, a small fire burning low. He didn't sleep much. Around midnight, he heard it, a low grunt, not close, but not far either. He stood slowly, turned off his lantern, and waited. The darkness shifted. A shape moved at the edge of the clearing, broad shoulders, slow, deliberate steps. The figure of a grizzly stepped into view, breath steaming in the cold night air. Elias didn't move, didn't speak. The bear stared at him, eyes catching the glow of the dying fire. Then it stopped. There was a pause, a long, breathless moment between two beings that should have been strangers. And then a sound, a soft, familiar huff. Elias's breath caught. He slowly brought his fingers to his lips and let out a low, slow whistle, the same whistle he had used 2 years ago. Once. Twice. The bear didn't charge, didn't flee. It huffed again. Elias felt something inside him crack open, a dam of memory, emotion, and disbelief. Takakota, the bear, stepped forward one more pace, then sat. Could a wild grizzly really remember the man who once saved him? And if so, what did he want now? Elias didn't sleep that night. Takakota didn't leave for hours, they simply existed in the same space, separated by only a few feet and 2 years of silence. The firelight flickered between them, casting shadows on the snow like old ghosts. Elias could barely breathe, afraid that any movement might shatter the fragile miracle unfolding before him. In the wild, grizzlies didn't act this way, especially not adult males who had tasted full independence. Takakota was huge now, easily 600 pounds, muscle rippling beneath thick fur, his face broader and more weathered. But the scar on his front paw was unmistakable, and so was the stillness in his presence, neither fear nor aggression, but recognition. As dawn crept in, Elias stood slowly, his knees cracking. The bear didn't react. Elias didn't dare speak at first, just moved to pack his things, every motion deliberate and respectful. "I don't know why you came," he finally said, his voice soft, "but if you came to say goodbye, I heard you." Takakota blinked slowly, tilting his head in that same curious way he used to as a cub. Then he rose, massive paws silent on the frosted earth, and turned back toward the forest. Elias expected him to disappear into the trees, but instead, Takakota stopped a few yards away and looked back. "An invitation," Elias muttered, grabbing his pack. "God help me. This is insane." He followed the bear, who led him through winding paths only an animal born of the wilderness could know, over ridges, across ice-locked creeks, through forgotten ravines. For hours they walked in near silence, the crunch of snow the only soundtrack. Elias wasn't sure what he was chasing, closure, wonder, or maybe just the truth. They reached a clearing by midday. A stream ran through it, frozen at the edges but still murmuring beneath the ice. It was peaceful, untouched. Takakota stood by the water, then turned to face Elias again. There was something in his posture, an unease. He pawed the snow near a cluster of low shrubs, then backed away. Elias stepped closer. That's when he saw it, blood, fresh, spattered against the snow, and not bear blood. Smaller tracks led away from the patch, canine. "Wolves," Elias whispered. He followed the trail a few steps further and found the half-buried body of a young fox, torn apart. Takakota stood watching him. "You brought me here to see this?" Elias asked. Then it hit him, not just wolves, something larger. Predator activity had been shifting lately. Park reports mentioned livestock raids along the outer border, a rogue male wolf pack had been moving in. Elias thought it was scattered behavior, but Takakota had shown him a pattern, a message. "You've been watching them, haven't you?" The bear sat, his gaze locked on Elias. That night, Elias set up camp again, this time not just to sleep but to think. Something was wrong in this region, and if the wolves were getting bolder, they could threaten more than just wildlife, including Takakota. Elias knew what he had to do. He had to go back, report it, and bring a team. But that meant leaving Takakota again. And if he did, would this miracle ever repeat? Would Takakota still be there when Elias returned, or was this one final gift before the wild reclaimed him for good? Elias raced back to base. The terrain felt different now, every fallen branch, every shifting shadow carried weight. He wasn't just a ranger anymore, he was the bearer of something no report could explain. A wild grizzly had led him to a blood-stained clearing, as if to warn him. And he believed it with everything in him. He returned to headquarters at dusk, half-frozen, his voice raw. His supervisor, Wade Harlan, looked skeptical as Elias laid out the details. "So a bear led you to a wolf kill site?" "Yes," Elias snapped. "A bear I released 2 years ago. He remembered me. He trusted me enough to—" "Elias," Wade interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "I know you've been through a lot, but these animals aren't your friends. They're wild. They operate on instinct. Don't read into this." Elias's jaw tightened. And what if his instinct is trying to protect something? Wade exhaled. "We'll send a team out tomorrow. You stay here, get rest." But Elias couldn't. While the team prepared, he sat in the old gear shed, going over topographic maps by lantern light. He marked Takakota's path, estimated wolf range, and checked where recent livestock reports had surfaced. It all formed a pattern, one that pointed to a potential den shift from the wolves, dangerously close to ranger posts and wildlife rehab trails. When morning came, the search crew moved out. But the forest had changed. Snow fell thicker, winds cut harder, and Takakota was gone. The clearing he had led Elias to was empty, no prints, no signs, just the quiet hum of a place that had held something sacred. But the bloodstains were still there, and now there were more. The team grew tense. One of the biologists, Rachel, found fresh wolf tracks overlapping with something else, grizzly prints, large and unmistakable, and a trail of fur. "Something's been hunted," she said, kneeling. "Or something's fighting back," Elias muttered. Back at base, Elias couldn't shake the unease. That night, he sat alone on the ranger porch, eyes fixed on the tree-lean, heart heavy. He remembered the look in Takakota's eyes, the intentionality of that moment. Had the bear come not just to warn him, but to ask for help? The answer came the next morning in blood. One of the younger rangers found the body of a poached elk along the outer fence of the park. It had been mauled but not consumed. The signs were messy, not the work of a clean predator. Beside the carcass was a dark patch of fur, grizzly fur. Elias felt his chest tighten. No, not him. He examined the fur under the light. It was thick and darker than Takakota's usual tone, maybe another bear, maybe not. But the trail nearby, deep claw marks against a tree, looked like a warning. Takakota wasn't running, he was fighting. That realization settled into Elias like a stone. If the wolves had pushed into his territory, if food was scarce, if Takakota had made himself a barrier between them and the human world, he might be alone out there and wounded. Elias didn't wait. He packed supplies, grabbed a med kit, and broke protocol. He left without permission, alone this time. He whispered, "I come to find you." But what if Elias was already too late? What if the wild had taken back its only gentle soul forever? The sky was lean gray when Elias crossed into the high valley again. Wind screamed through the tree trunks like a warning cry, and snow had begun to fall with a vengeful fury. Every step forward felt heavier than the last, not just from the terrain, but from the dread clawing at his chest. He followed the trail, the broken branches, the prints half filled with snow, claw marks in the bark of old birch trees, and long drag marks etched across the earth. Elias's breath came in ragged gasps as he moved faster, pushing deeper into Takakota's territory. Then he found it, a patch of earth torn apart, snow-stained crimson, tufts of dark fur caught in the bramble. The ground told a story, a battle, violent and desperate. Wolf tracks surrounded the area, at least 5, maybe 6, and in the center of it all, claw prints, deep, wide, Takakota. Elias fell to his knees. He touched the blood, now half-frozen, still fresh, but there was no body. "No," Elias whispered. "You're not gone. You're still fighting." He stood and kept going. Every part of his body screamed to stop, but he pushed forward, deeper into the backcountry than regulations ever allowed. He wasn't a ranger out here anymore. He was a man chasing a bond he never meant to make but could never abandon. Just before dusk, he heard it, a low growl, then a sharp, agonized yelp, wolves. Elias crept toward the sound, moving slow, rifle in hand, not to fire, but to scare. He reached a narrow gorge slick with ice and looked down. There they were, 4 wolves surrounding a large slumped form in the snow. Blood matted the fur along its flank. One wolf lunged forward to nip, and the figure snapped back with a roar that shook Elias to his core. Takakota. He was still alive, barely. His side was torn open, his leg limp, but his eyes burned with defiance. He swiped at the lead wolf with his uninjured paw, sending it sprawling into the snow. The others circled tighter. Elias didn't think. He fired one warning shot into the air. The sound shattered the stillness. The wolves froze, ears twitching. Another shot, and then a third. The pack scattered. Elias scrambled down the icy slope, stumbling twice until he reached the bear. Takakota didn't move. "Hey," Elias said softly, dropping to his knees beside him. "No, don't you do this." He pulled the emergency kit from his pack, hands trembling. He began cleaning the wound, packing gauze against the bleeding, whispering the same things he had whispered years ago, "You're okay now. I got you." Takakota groaned, a low, rasping sound, and blinked. "You remember me, don't you?" The bear's head shifted slightly toward Elias. His breath was labored, but his eyes held that same flicker, that same trust. Elias worked through the night. He built a fire, wrapped Takakota's wounds with strips of thermal cloth, kept wolves away by staying awake, rifle resting across his lap. As the cold deepened, he moved closer to Takakota's body, letting his own warmth bleed into the space between them. "If we make it through this," he whispered, eyes burning, "I'll never leave you again." And as the first light of morning broke across the frostbitten ridge, Elias felt the heavy weight of Takakota's head shift slightly against his leg, still alive, still holding on. But survival was only the beginning. The real test would come when Elias tried to bring a wounded grizzly back from the edge of death and into a world that might not let him stay free. Elias didn't sleep for the next 2 days. He stayed by Takakota's side, melting snow for water, foraging what little food he could find, and dressing wounds that refused to close. The gash along the bear's ribs had stopped bleeding, but infection was creeping in, and the limp in his back leg had worsened. They were too far from base, too far from help, and Takakota was too weak to move. Elias knew what he had to do. He hiked out 20 miles in 48 hours, barely eating, no radio signal, no backup. By the time he reached the ranger station, he was delirious, frostbitten, and half-mad with fear. He collapsed at the threshold, breathless, muttering just one word, "Takakota." When he came to, he was in the infirmary, with Dr. Mara Santos and Wade Harlan standing over him. "You found him?" she asked quietly. Elias nodded. "Alive, barely. He fought off a wolf pack. I drove them off, but he's not going to make it out of there without help." Wade shook his head. "We can't send a team after a wild grizzly, especially one that's injured and unpredictable. It's against policy." Elias sat up, eyes blazing. "He's not unpredictable. He's loyal. And he risked everything to protect the territory, to protect the people on the outskirts. He brought me there for a reason. Doesn't that count for something?" Wade hesitated. Then he said the quiet part out loud. "If we find him, we'll have to take him in. He'll never be released again." The words cut deep. If Takakota survived, he would never again roam the wild, never fish in the streams or sleep under the aurora sky. His freedom would be gone, locked behind fences, watched, studied. "Then I'm going back alone," Elias said. "He's not dying up there, not like this." Against all orders, Elias returned to the ridge, with Mara trailing behind. She had made her choice too. Somewhere in her science-hardened heart, she now believed in the impossible. They reached the clearing on the third night. Takakota was still there, barely breathing, but he raised his head when he saw Elias. No fear, no panic, just a soft sound, half exhale, half relief. Together, they loaded him onto a collapsible sled, using sedatives sparingly enough to ease the pain. For hours, they hauled him out of the wilderness, Mara reading vitals, Elias whispering the same low whistle every time. "You're okay now, I've got you." When they reached the mobile medical trailer, the team surrounded them, cameras flashed, and a few rangers gawked in disbelief. But Elias never left Takakota's side. The sedation deepened, IVs were placed, antibiotics administered, and the bear slipped into unconsciousness. One ranger leaned in to ask, "Why would he let you touch him like that?" Elias looked at him and answered with tears in his eyes, "Because he remembers." But what does a wild animal do with a memory when the only path forward might mean captivity? And could Elias ever forgive himself for saving Takakota in a world that might not let him go free again? Winter began to thaw in Denali, but inside the rehabilitation center, time seemed frozen. Takakota had survived surgery. The infection had passed, and the leg was healing, though he would always carry a slight limp. But every day, he sat near the reinforced glass wall of his enclosure, his eyes fixed on the distant forest just beyond the fences. He waited for weeks. Elias sat across from him, outside the enclosure, sometimes for hours. He never forced interaction. He just showed up, same as he did years ago when Takakota was a cub. Sometimes he read, sometimes he spoke softly. Always, he ended with the same low whistle. Takakota listened, always listened. The staff called him unusual. They said no bear had ever responded to a single person the way Takakota did to Elias. He didn't show fear. He didn't retreat. He didn't forget. And neither did Elias. But it wasn't enough. The director of wildlife control called Elias in for a final meeting. "We can't release him," she said. "He's too accustomed to human presence now. It's a liability. If he approaches the wrong person in the wild, it could cost him his life, and someone else's." Elias sat silently for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Then I stay with him." She blinked. "Excuse me." "I stay. I file for transfer. You open the North Observation Post as a sanctuary zone. He stays near the land he knows. I'll monitor him, not as a ranger, but as a guardian." "You'd give up your post for him?" Elias looked her in the eye. "He never gave up on me. It took 2 months, dozens of phone calls, and the support of Dr. Mara Santos, who submitted field reports documenting the bear's behavior, memory retention, and emotional patterns. But finally, permission was granted. Takakota would not be caged. Instead, a special semi-wild sanctuary was established at the edge of the old burn zone, acres of forest, running streams, and rocky shelter. His land, protected, fenced only at its farthest edges. He would be free, but safe. On the day of the transfer, Elias rode with Takakota in the truck. As they approached the gate, Elias whistled. Takakota raised his head, and when the doors opened, the bear stepped into the sun, turned once to look at Elias, and huffed a thank you. That spring, hikers who passed near the outer trails sometimes reported seeing a massive bear on the ridgeline. Never aggressive, just watching. Sometimes, when the wind was just right, they'd say they heard something else too, a low whistle echoing through the trees, and a bear answering back. Even in the vast wilderness, where instinct rules and silence reigns, memory has a voice. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it speaks back. Takakota wasn't just a bear. He was a soul that remembered kindness and gave it back when it mattered most. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves wildlife and heartfelt stories. Help us spread messages of strength, empathy, and wild beauty.